This is Top 10 Creepiest Small Towns in the US. Locals warn you not to visit. You ever drive through a town and something just feels off? Not dangerous exactly. Not broken down, just wrong. Like the air is too still, like everyone who sees your out-of-state plates already knows something you don't like. Taytown itself is watching you decide whether to stop for gas or keep moving. That feeling has a home. Actually, it has 10 of them. Today, we're counting down the 10 creepiest small towns in America. Not haunted house tourist traps, not Halloween gimmicks. Real places, real locals, real warnings passed down like heirlooms from people who stayed too long and people who got out just in time. These are towns where the history is heavy, the atmosphere is thick, and the vibe shifts. The second you cross the city limits, let's go. Number 10. Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that's been on fire since 1962. Centralia looks like a ghost town because it basically is one population under 10 people. Streets cracked open by underground heat, smoke seeping through the ground like the earth itself is exhaling something it regrets. And it's been like this for over 60 years. Here's what happened. In 1962, a coal mine fire started beneath the town and never stopped. The state relocated almost everyone. Almost. A handful of residents refused to leave and were eventually granted the right to stay until they die. Literally, their deeds revert to the state when they pass. That's not a detail. That's a sentence. The numbers paint a surreal picture. Population approximately 7, down from over 1,000 in the 1980s. Underground fire estimated to burn for another 250 years minimum. Ground temperatures in some spots exceed 180 degrees. Carbon monoxide levels have been recorded at dangerous concentrations above surface cracks. Median property value effectively zero. You can't insure it. You can barely visit it legally. Walking through Centralia means stepping over cracked asphalt where grass refuses to grow, past abandoned lots where houses used to stand, through steam that rises without warning. The old cemetery sits intact on a hill, still maintained, still receiving visitors, which means the only people who reliably come to Centralia anymore are either researchers, urban explorers, or people paying respects to the dead. Sometimes all three at once. Local sentiment, paraphrased from forums. You don't feel scared? Exactly. You feel like you're somewhere that stopped being part of the normal world a long time ago. That's not dramatic. That's accurate. Centralia is what happens when the ground beneath a community literally gives out, and the community dissolves around it, slowly, instead of all at once. No dramatic collapse, just a long, quiet ending. That's still happening right now while you read this. Number 9. Whittier, Alaska. One building, one exit, one way to leave. Whittier doesn't just feel isolated. It is structurally, architecturally, physically isolated in a way that should not be legal. Almost the entire population of roughly 200 people lives inside one building. The Begich Towers, a former military complex that now functions as apartment building, city hall, post office, school, church, and general store all under one roof. To leave town, you go through a one-lane tunnel shared with train traffic. The tunnel has scheduled hours. Miss the window, and you're staying. That's not a metaphor. That's Tuesday. Here are the numbers. Population, approximately 200.1. Road in and out through the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel. Tunnel operates on alternating one-direction traffic. Closes overnight. Average annual rainfall over 170 inches. Darkness for significant portions of winter. Temperatures that make you reconsider everything. What Whittier does to your brain is subtle. It's not a crime stat. It's claustrophobia at a geographic scale. Imagine waking up, going to work, getting groceries, attending church, and going back to sleep, all without once breathing outdoor air if you choose not to. Residents have described going weeks during winter without leaving the building. Not because they couldn't, because there was no practical reason to face what was outside. Local quote paraphrased from a documentary, after a while, you stop noticing it. And that's the part that should worry you. Whittier is an experiment in human adaptation to extreme isolation And the answer appears to be that people adapt fully and completely, and that might be the most unsettling part of all. Number 8. Dudleytown, Connecticut. The village that erased itself, Dudleytown doesn't exist anymore. That's the first thing to understand. It's a patch of forest in Cornwall, Connecticut. Private land. No trespassing signs. Dense tree cover even in summer, in a way locals describe as unnatural. But between the 1700s and the early 1900s, it was a functioning settlement, and its history reads like a checklist of misfortune. Families plagued by illness, unexplained deaths, residents who abandoned their homes without explanation, multiple suicides, a woman who reportedly went insane after her husband left for a day and returned to find her in a state no one fully documented in polite historical records. The Dudley family who founded it appeared cursed in England before they ever arrived in America. Every branch of the family tree has tragedy attached to it, going back generations across an ocean. Here are the facts as they exist now. The land is privately owned by the Dark Entry Forest Association. Access is strictly prohibited, and they enforce it. Multiple paranormal investigators have been turned away or removed. Even skeptics who have researched the site note that the biological growth patterns in the forest are genuinely unusual. Less undergrowth in surrounding areas. Animals reportedly avoid the space. Whether you believe in curses or not, the documented history of suffering attached to that patch of ground is real. And the fact that the people who own it now keep everyone out without explanation adds a layer that no horror movie needs to embellish. Leave it alone, says T-Sign. And somehow, it feels like the most honest warning on this entire list. Number 7. Cahoba, Alabama. The drowned capital, Cahoba, was once the capital of Alabama. Then the floods came, and they kept coming. And then the people left. Now it's a ghost town on a peninsula, at the junction of two rivers, and it has developed a reputation among locals and historians and people who visit once and don't go back as one of the most atmosphere-heavy places in the American South. Here are the facts. Cahoba served as Alabama's first state capital from 1820 to 1826. Flooding forced the capital to move to Tuscaloosa. Residents tried to stay, repopulate, rebuild. More floods, more abandonment. By the early 1900s, the town was essentially empty. Today it exists as an archaeological site managed by the Alabama Historical Commission. Ruins of antebellum homes, an old slave pen, cemeteries, foundations swallowed by vegetation, and two rivers that keep rising. Visitors report an emotional weight that's hard to explain and easy to feel. The history isn't just architectural. Cahoba had one of the largest enslaved populations in the region before the Civil War. It later became a Confederate prison camp with documented brutal conditions. Layers of suffering are baked into the ground, and the geography reinforces it. You're on a peninsula, water on two sides. Trees closing in from the third. The only way out is the way you came in. Local historians paraphrased from interviews. People come to photograph the ruins and leave quieter than they arrived. Not scared. Just quieter. Sometimes places carry what happened in them, and Cahoba has been carrying a lot for a very long time. Number 6. Moonville, Ohio. The tunnel that keeps its ghosts. Moonville was a coal and iron mining settlement in Vinton County that vanished so completely that only a railroad tunnel remains. No buildings, no roads, just trees reclaiming a hillside and that tunnel cutting through it. The Moonville Tunnel is one of the most visited and one of the most warned about spots in Ohio ghost lore, and the warnings don't come from tourism boards. They come from locals who grew up being told to stay away. Here's the documented history. Moonville existed from approximately 1856 to the early 1900s. It was served only by railroad. Residents had no road access. The town's population was almost entirely dependent on mining, and when the mines slowed, the town disappeared. Multiple deaths occurred on the railroad line in and around the tunnel, including brakemen and engineers who died on the tracks. At least several of these deaths are documented in local newspaper records from the era. The tunnel itself is real, walkable, covered in graffiti, and sits deep enough in the Wayne National Forest that cell service disappears before you get to it. It is genuinely dark in the middle of the day. The kind of dark that makes your eyes work harder and your brain fill in details. Vinton County itself is the poorest county in Ohio. Unemployment consistently high. Population shrinking. The towns around Moonville are barely surviving. So when locals say don't go out there at night, they're not performing ghost stories. They're describing a stretch of deep rural isolation where help is genuinely far away and the history of the ground underfoot is not comfortable. One online commenter put it plainly, "It's not the ghost that scares you. It's realizing how alone you are when you're standing there." Yeah, that one lands. Number 5. Oatman, Arizona. The town that time and common sense left behind. Oatman is technically a tourist destination now. Old West storefronts, burros, wandering the main street, gold rush nostalgia packaged for day trippers on Route 66. But the locals, the ones who actually live there, tell a different version, because once the tour buses leave and the sun drops behind the Black Mountains, Oatman becomes something else entirely. Population approximately 128 people. Located in the Mojave Desert at an elevation that makes summer temperatures routinely exceed 110 degrees. No grocery store. No hospital within reasonable distance. Limited law enforcement presence. The nearest real town is Kingman, roughly 28 miles away on a mountain road that becomes genuinely dangerous in bad weather and honestly questionable in good weather. Oatman was a booming gold mining town in the early 1900s. When the gold ran out, the town hollowed out almost overnight. What's left is the shell and a tourism industry, built on that shell and a small group of full-time residents living inside a movie set version of a place that used to mean something. The creepiness isn't supernatural here. It's existential. You're in a functioning community that exists as a display of a dead community. Local resident paraphrased from an interview. Everybody smiles for the tourists during the day. At night, it's just us and the desert and all that quiet. The desert quiet at night around Oatman is total. No traffic hum, no ambient light pollution beyond a few bare bulbs. Just wind, rocks, and the particular darkness of a place that the modern world almost entirely passed by. If that sounds romantic, add in isolation-driven substance issues that locals openly discuss, limited mental health resources anywhere near the area, and a geography that makes leaving harder than staying and see if it still sounds like a weekend getaway. Number 4. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman isn't even the scariest part. Everyone comes to Point Pleasant for the moth, the statue, the museum, the festival, the tea, and that's fine. Tourism is keeping this town breathing, but the locals will tell you, if you ask the right ones, that the Mothman legend is almost a relief because it gives the town a story to tell about 1967 that isn't just the Silver Bridge collapse. In December of 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio fell into the Ohio River. During rush hour traffic, 46 people died. An entire community's sense of safety collapsed with it, and the Mothman sightings that had been reported throughout that year became permanently fused with that tragedy in the town's memory. Here are the numbers that matter beyond the legend. Median household income approximately $27,000. Poverty rate roughly 30%. Population declining steadily. Opioid crisis impact severe, even by West Virginia standards, which are already among the worst in the nation. Unemployment above state average. Point Pleasant is a town that survived one of the worst bridge disasters in American history and has been quietly struggling ever since. The Mothman statue downtown is cheerful and weird and photogenic. 2 blocks away, the economic reality hits, like the cold air off the river. And the locals who warn visitors about Point Pleasant aren't warning about cryptids. They're warning about a town that carries grief in its infrastructure and has been doing so for nearly 60 years without enough support to process it. You can visit and take your photos with the statue. Just know, the real story is heavier than the merchandise suggests. Number 3. Gibsonton, Florida. The town Carney's built. Gibsonton doesn't look dangerous. It barely looks like a town. It looks like a series of properties along Highway 41 south of Tampa that never quite decided what they wanted to be. Trailers in unusual structures and lots with fencing you can't see through, and a post office that once had a special window installed to accommodate a resident who was 8 feet tall. That last detail is real. Gibbshumpton was for decades the official off-season home of carnival and circus workers across America, sideshow performers, ride operators, animal trainers, and people whose professional identities were built around being categorized as spectacle. They came here because the zoning laws were uniquely accommodating. You could keep animals on your property. You could operate certain businesses out of your home. You could exist outside the lines that most municipalities draw. That community has largely dispersed now, but what's left is the atmosphere. Residents who remember when the neighborhood included giants and fire eaters, and a man known professionally as Lobster Boy who was actually convicted of murder in 1978. Median household income, low even by Hillsborough County standards. Infrastructure, visibly strained. The county has been slowly absorbing Gibbshumpton into suburban sprawl, but the older core of the town resists it. Local quote, paraphrased from a longtime resident, "This place always attracted people who didn't fit anywhere else." That's not an insult. That's the whole point. And when the people who define the identity of a place scatter, what's left is the echo of something that doesn't translate ISLE to outsiders. Gibbshumpton doesn't warn you away loudly. It just looks back at you from behind a chain-link fence and lets you decide how curious you really are. Number 2. Helltown, Ohio. The name was already a warning. Helltown is what locals call the area around Boston Township in Summit County, Ohio, after the federal government purchased and evacuated the land in the 1970s to create the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. Residents were displaced. Homes were vacated. And then, instead of demolishing everything quickly, the government left buildings standing for years. Abandoned houses, a shuttered school, a church with an inverted cross that turned out to be a perfectly standard Christian symbol seen from the outside, but which became legend in the regional imagination because the context was already so unsettling. A road that locals call the end of the world, where a yellow gate blocks a former road that dead ends over a valley. A cemetery. Always a cemetery. Here are the real numbers. The evacuation displaced hundreds of families. The government's slow clearance left visible abandoned infrastructure for over a decade. The area became a magnet for teenagers, and later, for legend. Multiple false stories circulated, including a chemical spill, a satanic cult, escaped mental patients. None of these were true. All of them became part of the folklore anyway. And that's the actual creepy thing about health. The real story: government displacement of an entire community, bureaucratic abandonment. People losing their homes to eminent domain and watching them sit empty for years is disturbing enough without embellishment. The legends grew to fill a vacuum left by real institutional failure. Locals from the area who grew up during that period described the landscape as genuinely upsetting. Long before the ghost stories attached to it, the houses of your neighbors standing empty is a specific kind of wrong that doesn't need a supernatural explanation. And if Helltown disturbs you because of what people did to it, the number 1 town on this list will disturb you because of what it did to itself. Number 1. Bodie, California, where the gold ran out and everything else did too. Bodie is the most authentic ghost town in America. Not restored, not reconstructed, officially designated as a state of arrested decay, which means the state of California actively preserves its deterioration. Every broken window, every rusted stove, every calendar still showing a date from decades past is maintained in exactly the condition it was found, and walking through it feels like stepping into a moment that stopped without warning. Here's the history. Bodie boomed in the late 1870s after a major gold discovery. Population reached approximately 10,000 at its peak. It had a reputation even then. Contemporary newspapers called it the roughest, most lawless town in the West. Shootings, robberies, and fires were documented weekly events. The boom ended, and the population bled out slowly then quickly. By 1940, only a handful of people remained. A fire in 1932 destroyed much of the town. Another in 1945 took more. What survived is what you see today. Here are the details that matter. Roughly 200 buildings still standing, furniture still inside them, dishes still on tables, a child's toy still on a bedroom floor. All of it left exactly as it was. The park is remote. 13 miles of road to reach it. The last 3 unpaved. At altitude above 8,000 feet, snow can fall in every month of the year. Visitors have reported something locals call the Bodhi curse. Anyone who removes even a small object from the town receives misfortune until the object is returned. The park receives returned objects regularly, mailed back with letters of apology. That detail is documented and verified by park rangers. Whether you believe in the curse or not, people believe in it enough to mail rocks back from across the country. And the thing about Bodhi that no photograph fully communicates is the silence. You're standing inside a preserved moment of collective human abandonment. And the silence isn't peaceful. It has texture. Aswait, like the town is still deciding something. One ranger paraphrased from an interview. People get quiet when they walk through here. Real quiet, not respectful quiet. Unsettled quiet. There's a difference. There is a difference. And Bodhi knows exactly which one it's producing. If you thought a place needed tragedy or crime or supernatural legend to get under your skin, Bodhi proves that sometimes all it takes is evidence that everyone left and nobody came back. That's the list. 10 towns. 10 different versions of wrong. Some are economically hollowed out. Some are geographically trapped. Some carry history so heavy the ground seems to sag under it. All of them have locals who will look at you when you say you're thinking of visiting and say something like, "Just be careful," or "Don't stay after dark," or "Honestly, why?" And that why is the whole point. Subscribe, because sometimes the best travel advice comes from understanding exactly what you'd be driving into before you turn off the highway.